with that law enforcement, type of mentality of, oh, you tell me to do this and I'm going to go solve that problem. Well, for me, it was, I know that I need to, sell X amount of jobs per week, per day to get this bonus, to hit these goals. So I kind of just do that every month. And I've never really lost that. And anything above what my goal is just icing on the cake. So once you establish that wheel and your pipeline stays full, that residual, you're guaranteed commissions every week because you're closing jobs out.
Welcome everybody out to the D2D Podcast. We got the Golden Door Deep Dive segment with Mr. Brandon Thrower, brought to us from Atlanta, Georgia. Dude, how you doing?
I'm doing well, man. How about yourself?
Dude, not as good as you at 2.9 or $3 million of revenue sold in roofing in 2023. How did you do it? Give us your secrets, dude.
So, here's the thing about any sales, in my opinion. My first year in the industry that I'd ever even been in sales, I did over 2 million. And there's not really a cheat code or anything like that. I mean, you'll hear every expert that ever speaks on this topic. It's about how hard you work and how consistent you are. Now, we had some bigger storms in our market that helped, I think, all of us in the company as far as a little bit more volume this year. But it was really about just taking the same application that you have with every single customer that you deal with and being, as smooth with your process and as consistent with your communication as possible. And then those referrals just continue to build and build and build. So that was it was just about how I handled the influx of business as opposed to anything like special that I did.
Absolutely. And I think that is absolutely key for people to understand. It's like, there's no secret pitch. There's no, obviously we all get lucky with storms coming through. But even without storms, there's the work ethic part of it is such an incredible piece. So I want to dive into your story a little bit. So walk me through, how'd you get into the industry?
So it's kind of one of those chance luck situations. I was in law enforcement prior for almost 16 years. So I got into this, kind of late. I train at a local gym here and have been doing jiu-jitsu for almost 4 years. And several of my guys there either work for roofing companies or in the sales industry. So one of my buddies, kind of reached out, was like, "Hey man, I got a job available for you. And I hear you talk about law enforcement and about how, guys are getting in and out of it. And it's not, something you want to do long-term for the rest of your life. So, why don't you just give us a, chance to interview?" So I did, talk to my wife about it naturally. And she was actually more supportive than anything, with getting out of law enforcement, because I was doing a pretty, dangerous side of, that particular, job. And I didn't know what to expect, man. I was like, I know a lot about building supplies. My dad grew up working for one of our local suppliers here where I'm from. So I had a basis of it. I framed houses when I was in college. And that's why I didn't get into the construction trade, because I was like, I don't want to break my back for the rest of my life. But when I got into it, what I realized was, I've been really good at customer service and law enforcement for so long that dealing with customers and sales was fairly easy, because you're dealing with people that are calling you to spend money with you, for lack of better terms, so just dealing with being able to communicate with people and keeping that line very open. And then me, I'm just a learner. So I just started sponging and absorbing everything I could about our products, our materials, how we put, the products on, how everything's going to look. And that process, I think, has, given me a lot of success with the customer base. And also the area that I work in, I'm born and raised here, almost 40 years old. So I know a lot of people within the community.
That's pretty awesome, actually. You have a whole career in law enforcement, and you decide to throw in the towel and run to sales. And I love how some of those skills translated over. What initially got you into law enforcement?
So I was in college at the time, and believe it or not, one of my best friends from high school, his dad retired out of law enforcement, and I was taking a criminal justice class because that was kind of where I was gearing towards, either there or going into teaching. And I was taking a course, had to do a paper, and had to interview someone that was in law enforcement. And emailed him the questions. He emailed the responses back so I could write my paper. And at the end of it, he said, "Oh, by the way, if you need a job, we're hiring." So being a broke college kid, I was like, so there's like retirement benefits. I got health. I got a decent salary at that time, for a kid that didn't have a job. I was like, I'll take you up on that. So I did that and got into it. And like, most other job fields that you get into, you kind of say, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it to the best of my abilities, and thought that I may one day retire from it.
And then one thing led to another, and here we are.
Yeah, so I'd had several job opportunities as I got further into my law enforcement career, just because, just meeting contacts. Hey, man, I did public safety for X amount of years, and I got out of it, started running my own business. I think you'd be a good fit. And I was always kind of scared to take a chance on getting into a secondary career after, 14, 15 years of doing this for my entire life. But what I realized shortly after getting into sales was I probably should have done it sooner. Because when you're working a government job, you're only allowed so much income based off of years of service, based off of promotions and things like that. So there's a cap every year, no matter what you do, aside from working some part-time and overtime. So I was working a lot of hours to make a substantial income or a sustainable income. What I realized in sales is there's no cap, right? So it's all about what you put into it that you get out of it. So that's what I like about it. I like the freedom. I'm at home more with my family naturally, can be present with my kids. So the flexibility of the job is also really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're not, risking your life. It's less dangerous. I mean, there's some pretty crazy doors out there, but it doesn't get that crazy.
No. My worst customers never been as bad as any situation that I had that was, bad in law enforcement. So that's kind of the cool part about it. I always tell people it's dangerous, of course, because, you're climbing around on roofs, but nobody's trying to shoot at me, knock on wood. I nenever had to deal with that while I'm up there.
Yeah, absolutely true. So, I'm loving what you're saying is like, yeah, a lot of people get disillusioned. The golden handcuffs, they call them, you get stuck in the 9 to 5, the rat race, the salary job, but you get the consistent paycheck weekly. And so you're tied to it. So, but that's the beauty of sales. Like you were saying, is like, there's no cap, there's no limit. You decide what you're worth. So, obviously you went into it with a bang, like immediately started slinging, and you were like, I'm worth, this much more money. What do you think it was that made it so, I guess I don't want to say easy, but how did you start out so successful in sales?
So, my first month in on my own after we went through training, because our company does a really good job at Hero of training you, through a process, kind of how to do it, to go out and start door knocking to establish, some clientele base. I got really aggressive, started putting everything out on social media so that people that I knew that I was doing something new. But what I did was I hustled really hard to start establishing my pipeline on my own. And then I knew that my boss, my owner, Nick, would start to, throw me more of the company leads to kind of balance it out. Right. So basically, that law enforcement, type of mentality of, oh, you tell me to do this and I'm going to go solve that problem. Well, for me, it was, I know that I need to, sell X amount of jobs per week, per day to get this bonus, to hit these goals. So I kind of just do that every month, and I've never really lost that. And anything above what my goal is just icing on the cake. So once you establish that wheel and your pipeline stays full, that residual, you're guaranteed commissions every week because you're closing jobs out. Even some of the ones that you've forgotten about, you're like, oh, well, that one was closed out this week, so we're good now. I made more than I thought I was going to make. It's really just about that and staying on top of what you're doing. Like, you have to be communicative to any person that you're dealing with that's spending money with you. You have to be an open book. You have to be available. I have a lot more free time. I'll tell you a quick story. I had a customer the other day, very small job. She was very impressed with how we were very constant line of communication with her. And she said, really what sold me on you, because this other guy I bid from was a guy that, had been in this industry for 25, 30 years. She's like, I sent you a message on Christmas and you responded back, and you didn't have to. I know you got kids. I know you got a wife. And I was like, well, it took me 10 seconds to respond back to that because it was a simple question that I could answer. Why would I just completely push you off to the next day, or 2 days later, when I could answer it and then put my phone down and go back to doing what we were doing? So that's just kind of, I treat everybody, no matter small job, big job, like they're the same. They all mean the same to me.
Yeah. And I think it comes off, like you were saying, like it comes across well to the customer, to that constant communication. Absolutely key. I think that's awesome. So, I want to dive into kind of some of the more like day-to-day nuances of the Golden Door winner for roofing. What does your routine look like? What does your workday look like?
So I'm a big proponent of trying to stay in the same type of routine every day. I'm typically up early. Like I said, I train, and we usually do jujitsu classes 4 or 5 days a week. I'm usually in there up at 4:30, in there by 5:36, done training by 7, shower. By 8 o'clock, I'm usually following up with all the people in my pipeline that need to be followed up with. This time of year, with it being colder, roofs are frostier, so I typically like to set the appointments later to midday after. But I go through all my follow-ups, make sure I touch who I need to touch, communicate with the office on jobs that need to be closed out or jobs that need to be pushed along into scheduling because contracts have been signed. And then I run appointments as they come in. If we're really busy, then appointments usually are going to start during storm season around 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning. You're going to run those all day. So you have to be really good at multitasking sometimes while you're on those leads, while you're on the roof. For me, I always do any task that kind of comes up throughout the day right then, because then I'm not going to forget about it. It's most fresh on my mind. And if you don't put it off now, you won't have to worry about it tomorrow. So I do that. It's all about the continuous cycle of you just get up and you're doing the same thing over and over and over again every day. If I have dead time where I may be on social media, then I'm looking at the groups that I'm in. Is somebody looking for a roofing contractor? Are they looking to have somebody come take a look at theirs? So I'm still engaged on all those platforms, trying to bring in new business if all possible. So there's really not a time during that 8 to 5 period or 8 to 6 period this time of year, because it gets dark a little bit earlier, where I'm not available or expecting some type of work to come in or doing work. So I think if anybody that's new into the business can just figure that out and know that, you may have a day where you only have 2 appointments set. By the end of that day, you may have ran 4 or 5, because people are going to call you. People are going to refer you. You're going to get a random phone call and you're going to be like, hey, you did my neighbor's roof 3 weeks ago. Been meaning to call you. Love to have you come out and take a look at it for me. You have to be, it's fluid is the best way that I can explain sales. This has to be very fluid.
Yeah, absolutely. And like that consistency, like day in and day out. It also is like, if I can do, jujitsu every day, day in and day out, I can make sales day in and day out, and then keeping your ear constantly to the ground, never letting your foot off the gas. It's just that steady Eddie mentality. You know what I mean? I think you got that down really well. It sounds like. Now kind of diving in a little nitty gritty in the roofing business side of it. Let's talk about, talk to me about like knocking in like a saturated area, let's say a storm just went through, a bunch of roofing companies are going through a neighborhood after a big storm. What are you doing to differentiate yourself?
So, especially in those heavy areas where you have a big storm, what you want to do, for us, we were blessed. We had a huge hailstorm back in March of 23. It hit probably a good 30-40% of, our actual county that I live in. So we had massive amounts of call-ins that very first Monday after the storm was on a Sunday. We had 175 leads called into the office. I had probably 5 to 10 just message me on Facebook that I had to set up. So we were blessed to have that basis. But when you go to the neighborhood and you run that first lead, the best thing that you can do, a lot of times if they're calling you out there, those are much easier to close because that's somebody that's been referred or they have heard good things, they read your reviews, whatever. But the key there is to let them know, hey, we're a local company. We're right here in your backyard. When we do your work, when we do your your roof and everything gets taken care of, your warranty will be issued. We're a manufacturer, Master Elite certified company with GAF, largest shingle manufacturer in the world. We try to, kind of hit all of those points of it's not just a company, we're not a fly by night. We're not going to be out of business and you're stuck with a warranty that's no good. And if you call us because there's a warranty issue or something that we're right here, we're 10 minutes away from you. We're going to come back out and service it. We're going to make contact with you. You're not going to have to worry about calling us from Texas because we drove out here, with 3 or 4 sales reps and hit the area real hard and trying to get them to come back out and service your warranty. A lot of that stuff matters to people because they sit back and the wheels start spinning like, well, I know these guys knocked on my door last night, at 10 o'clock at night. Thought that was kind of weird, but I've never heard of them before. I can't really find any reviews on them. So then they start thinking, okay, well, so if you get one, then you go knock on the door next door, you go knock on the other neighbor's door next door, and you kind of, if they're not home, you leave them some literature, a door hanger with your information on it. And people with technology being, right there with their thumbprint, they're gonna vet you. They're gonna look you up if you put your first and last name on there. They can find you on social media. They're gonna check you out. They're gonna check your business out. And I found that, what makes people choose you is they trust you. And then, if they have a bunch of questions, I always try to be prepared because some people will go on to the manufacturer's website, look at installation guidelines to the T, and they will hit you with every question that's in there. And if you don't have an immediate response or if you're not educated and you don't know what you're doing, then they're going to be like, not sure if I want to use these guys. So you have to be kind of prepared to be questioned, to be vetted just as much as, you would vet a homeowner because, there's always those red flag customers that sometimes you're like, I should probably not do business with this person.
Yeah. You got to always be prepared, right? For the engineer who reads every word of the contract and asks you every little thing. Yeah, I think that's brilliant. I mean, it's like the speed of trust, right? The faster they trust you, the faster they do business with you. And that's probably, I love that, you guys are local, you're trustworthy, you got those reviews, you have that backing for, to create great business within the area. So, now kind of diving into like working alongside an adjuster, what tips do you have for that?
So, you'll see a lot of stuff if you're like in this particular industry for these groups, and you'll see guys going in and kind of hamming on their adjusters, taking videos of them, complaining about them. And I totally can empathize with that. I get it. I've dealt with some adjusters before where I was just like, man, come on. Is this really the person that the insurance company sent out to determine whether or not we're dealing with damage or not? But what I found is you get a whole lot further if you just treat them with respect, try to help them as much as possible so that they can help you, because you may be dealing with a guy that's got 20 years of experience that may know more than you know. Or you may be dealing with somebody who just started this job. And so I take myself back to the very first adjuster I ever dealt with was super helpful. He knew that I was new and I was just trying to learn. So I had him show me things. And I kind of treat everybody that way. Hey, do you need me to hold the ladder for you? You want me to bring your Ridge Pro up? If you'll do those things, a lot of times you're going to get a lot more success as long as you're calling in claims that need to be called in. That's the other coin of sales, especially in the roofing market, because a lot of guys work, insurance only. And sometimes you just need to tell your customer, hey, there's no damage here. There's not enough. It's not going to be sufficient enough to be covered under your insurance policy. I'm not a licensed adjuster. I don't talk policy, but I do know policy. I'm also a consumer. I also have insurance, so I know what the policy states, and I can educate the customer, on all of those things. So they're also going to trust you a lot more when you do that. Sometimes it's just an old roof, and that's why we have a really good retail model at Hero also. Sometimes it's just going to be something that you're going to either have to pay for now or later. And later here lately is going to cost you a lot more money. So people are kind of, if it's just an old roof and I know I need to get it replaced because I got a couple of leaks, but there's no real storm damage up there, they're going to be more apt to go with the company. It's like, all right, well, they're not going to try to push a, claim on me. I know I need to go ahead and get it replaced. They got financing options. So really our model gives them so many different options and, ways that they can go about it, that it almost, makes them feel like they're the ones that are making the decision. So I think that consumers, want to feel that. They don't want to be pressured into replacing the roof. But if you're honest with them and say, hey, X, Y, and Z is why it's not going to be covered under your policy, because it's also important for them to know what type of policy they have, because everybody, sometimes they just get online, get this cheap policy and it doesn't cover things. So you have to help them. And then that helps, your relationship with your adjusters when they come out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that, just upfrontness with the customer too, and that level of honesty, because it's like you're not pulling something out of thin air. You're very straightforward, like, hey, honestly, there's no damage here.
Yeah. And I mean, if they got a relatively new roof, it's 6 years old, and storm came through and it was a smaller hailstorm where there's hardly any damage at all, if not any. Sometimes you just got to be honest with them and be like, hey, it's a really good time to come out and take a look at it with the storms that are here. What we'll do is we'll put you in the watch list. We get another storm that comes to this particular area again, we'll be the first ones to reach out to you and see if you'd like to have it re-inspected for you.
There we go. I love it. So now talk to me. Let's talk a little bit about mindset. What would you say to someone that might be really struggling and maybe they're struggling with the routine, they're struggling to get consistency every day, and they're struggling to get some sales? What would you tell that rep?
So I mean, everybody goes through that, right? I think December was my slowest month last year. I wasn't really all that slow. Had a really strong last week of the year to kind of close it out and it'd be a pretty decent one on the board. But I was also trying to close out as many as my invoiced and prospects that we needed to get kind of cleared up before the end of the year as possible. But you go through those lulls where you feel like, man, I'm just ran these appointments, they're getting other estimates, I just can't close one. Consistency. You have to consistently be optimistic. And the best time to close a deal is after you just signed one up. So if you sign one up, you kind of had this euphoria, this high of like, man, I got one on the board. Let me go ahead and follow up with Mr. Smith, because I just went out to his house 3 days ago and he was supposed to get back with me within a day or two. A lot of times, if you do that, you'll kind of build a positive steamroll, because you're going to be in a good mindset. You're going to be positive about it. Mr. Smith's going to be like, yeah, I was meaning to call you back anyway. And then boom, next thing you know, you got two. So it's all about building that momentum back up, because you're going to have the highs and the lows. You have to be able to deal with that day to day, because you're going to have days where you feel like, man, I couldn't sell a roof if it hit me in the face, or I can't go to a house and not sell a roof. Like they're calling me left and right, so you have to be able to balance that. The biggest thing that kills people is they get in that negative mindset of, man, my prices are too high, customers are too cheap, and then that negativity kind of breeds the way that you, whether or not you realize it or not, how you interact with the coworkers, how you interact with the customers. It'll hurt you when you go home and interact with your family, so you have to have that optimism that every time I go out here, I'm gonna kill this one. Like I have myself a little pep talk sometimes before I go to a lead, before I get out of the truck. Like, all right, we're gonna close this one call, one close. We're not gonna come back for a follow up. And you just kind of, hype yourself up when you go in there, so that you have this real positive mentality when you start speaking with the customer. I
love that. Stay consistently optimistic. I love that. So Brandon, dude, thanks so much for hopping on the podcast, sharing your tips and tricks. Do you have any parting words for the industry, for all your fellow roofers?
Oh man, guys, just enjoy it. Strive to be better every day that you go out there. If you're just a little bit better each day, that's an opportunity for you to be somewhere between 300 and 65 to 66% better every day. You know what I mean? So just go out there, or every year, go out there with the anticipation that I'm going to close deals, and just be hungry. If you'll act like every day was day one where you're most hungry that I have to close a deal, then you'll never worry about how big or how small the deal is. You're just always excited because I closed a deal. If you can get yourself into that mentality to where the small little repairs that are, several $100s as opposed to the $25,000 roofs are the same to you, then you never lose that, excitement of when I close a deal.
Love it. I love it. Well, guys, this has been the Golden Door Deep Dive segment of the podcast. Keep tuning in to see how you can become a Golden Door winner yourself.